Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the fourth installment of my prep and road to 2024 USPA Nationals. Today, I'm back at the Coliseum Barbell Club for my lower body day, and I gotta say, I came into this workout feeling pretty damn good. I'm also officially registered for Nationals, paid and everything, and that just means that shit is about to get real. Now, being officially registered for the meet kind of changes the game a little bit, in the sense where, yes, I've been working hard this entire time, I've been prepping for this meet, and I know I'm going to compete at it, but actually registering and having that confirmation email, knowing that you're now on the roster, puts things into a bit of a different perspective. Because at that point, it's tangible, it's confirmed, and it's not really a theoretical thing anymore. You can't back out or decide you don't want to do it last minute. Like, I'm in, I'm committed, I'm dedicated, and that's going to bleed into my training. And honestly, transitioning over to that mindset and way of thinking is exactly what I needed to do to actually get into all these competitions. Even going back to my bodybuilding days, it was something I always thought about in theory, but never really jumped into it. I found myself thinking more about it than actually taking any steps to start getting into the competitions. It wasn't until I actually signed up and made it tangible, made it a real thing that's coming up, that my entire mentality had to shift. And in my opinion, there's a huge difference between theoretically or possibly or maybe being 10 weeks out from a competition versus actually being registered in 10 weeks out from a competition. So I'm officially registered. It's game time. I'm locked in and ready to go. And today is my lower body day. As you see, I'm doing some warm-ups for my knees. These are warm-ups that I actually learned in physical therapy. I was wrapping that band around my ankles and just going from sitting down as low as I can and transitioning up into kind of like a high squat, which the purpose of that is to actually force my knees and the joints around my knees to get used to being in that position, because I have to be able to hold a squat without sitting down completely. And incorporating this movement into my warm-ups has been an absolute game changer. Now, what you see me doing here is a forward fold, really a huge staple in yoga, something that I've been doing for years, which really helps with spinal decompression, because at work, I'm sitting down a lot, and this workout was right after a full day of working and sitting down for the majority of the day. One thing that I want to do, get better at working on, is standing up so I don't have to deal with that tight back by the time I get to the workout, but it's a work in progress. Now, you see me doing the same exact thing, just this time with the bar on my back. I'm sitting a little higher than I should be. Ideally, I could be sitting right below that parallel line that would just count as a lift, kind of towing that line, because I feel like that's a skill as a powerlifter that you need to have. Because ideally, you can squat ass to grass, right? Make that depth undeniable, make it so that you're sitting well below parallel and the judges cannot even question your depth. But squatting that kind of depth at a maximum load can definitely take away from the amount that you can actually move. Because obviously, squatting ass to grass is maximum range of motion, whereas just below parallel is a shorter range of motion. And as we know in lifting, the shorter the range of motion, the more weight you can probably lift. And obviously, that's not the case for everybody, but for me, it certainly is. My issue is having that previous issue with my knees makes it really hard to be able to stay at that just below parallel point, because the tendons hadn't been strong enough to be able to hold that position. So naturally, I would just squat ass to grass because that's all I could do. From a mechanical perspective, it was almost counterproductive for me to even try to sit below parallel. So that's why I've been doing these warm-ups that you're watching right now, really getting those joints warm. And again, going back to physical therapy really helped me tremendously. So the goal is to really be able to lock in that depth that is below parallel enough to a point where the lift will count, but I'm not sitting ass to grass. That's kind of like that sweet spot. So in an effort to really be able to maximize my 1 rep max on squat, I want to get my squat at that sweet spot. And that's definitely not going to happen without a consistent effort to be meticulous about doing movements that can help me get there, and then incorporating that mechanically when I actually start to put some weight on the bar. But right now, you're seeing me put my knee sleeves on. I put those socks on because it makes sliding the knee sleeves up my legs significantly easier. I can't believe it took till this year for me to discover that method. I always knew it was a thing, but I never needed it until I got these sleeves, which are super stiff, and they just slide up with zero effort. It also allows me to get the sleeves really high up my quad. I've never had a pair of knee sleeves that can sit that high on my quad, and it's definitely different because I don't feel too much compression on the calf, which has always been an issue with super stiff sleeves like the Inzers, where over the course of the workout, my calf starts to get really tight, and I even sometimes lose circulation depending on how tight the sleeve is. So being able to have a pair of knee sleeves that sit over my calf is definitely new for me, but it's a great feeling. Now, at this point, I'm going through the phases of my workout. I have like multiple different phases of my workout, especially on a big muscle group like legs. I want to make sure I'm getting an adequate enough warm up. So right now, I'm just warming up with the bar and the sleeves on and my shoes. This is kind of a prerequisite to getting some weight on. Now, at this point, you see me slap 135 on the bar. These are sets that I like to call indicator sets, just to give me a feel of how I'm going to feel that day. These are sets that I should be able to just mindlessly bang out, and they always tell me, am I going to have a good day, or am I going to have a bad day, or is it going to be a midday? It all starts with, some basic simple weight, which is crazy that at one point in time, this was heavy for me. And just 6 years later, I don't even think about it. But that's just a reminder of how long it really takes to build anything, especially when we're talking about strength, we're talking about physique. It really takes years of doing it. And people often have this mentality of wanting things too quickly, especially things like getting strong, which takes a ridiculous amount of consistency over years to get it done. And people want to see those results in 3 to 4 weeks, and they get disappointed when it doesn't happen, not realizing that it's a marathon and not some race. So stick it out, give it time, be consistent, and watch the results happen in the long term. But that set both looked and felt great, which indicated to me that I could go up a lot heavier than I normally would. So I slapped 225 on the bar, and as a reminder, I'm doing these with about a 7-second eccentric, making them significantly harder than just a normal squat. Because with that slow of an eccentric, I have no choice but to make sure that every rep is mechanically sound. Start to play around with my foot placement a little bit because those last few reps didn't necessarily feel the best sitting down. And that's one of the reasons why I really like that slow eccentric. It kind of exposes the areas of improvement. So if I can kind of catch that with my first 2 working sets, maybe 3 working sets, as I start to get a little bit higher in the working sets, I can correct that. And these last few sets definitely felt significantly better. I had much better burst on the concentric, and that just helped the entire set flow so much better. So ideally you can get under the bar and everything can be exactly how you want it, just second nature. But, for people like me who just got into powerlifting, it definitely takes a little bit of time to lock everything in to the point where you're extremely comfortable. And the goal for me is to get to that point where I can just mindlessly get under a bar and everything is just second nature. Now for this next set, I throw 245 on the bar, and as you're going to see, a 7-second eccentric gets significantly harder even with just 10 more added pounds. So in an effort to not decrease the weight too much or too light, in an effort to get exactly 7 seconds, I figured, let me do as long as I can. Let me do kind of like a slow eccentric to failure. And as you see, contrary to the set before that, my depth kind of corrects to where it would normally be at a heavier load. I'm not sitting completely ass to grass, but I'm exactly in that sweet spot that I was talking about earlier where I clearly hit good depth, but it's not me sitting down on the floor. But this is really ideal for me. Like, that's where I want to be. In a perfect world, I can be hitting a 1 rep max, and that's where my depth is at. And also doing these slow eccentrics is actually going to kind of train my central nervous system to be comfortable sitting there. So with my program changing in a couple weeks and going back to doing more traditional squats on my leg day, I'm really interested to see how these are going to affect that. Now at this point, I got to take a little bit of a breather, sit down, think about myself a little bit, drink my BCAAs, which I put in my bottle off camera, and I slap some 10s on there, bringing the weight up to 265. So I'm really trying to get in the mindset of going up and not backwards, the same way that I would do on a chest day. The only way I'm going to get my lower body to kind of match my upper body in terms of intensity is if I train them the same. And if I train them with the same intensity. I have this thing called the rule of swole, my own kind of personal code that I go by in the gym, which says if I complete the set, no matter how hard it is, I have to go up. It doesn't have to be by 10 pounds. It doesn't have to be by 20 pounds. It can be even 2.5 pounds, but I have to go up. It's not just the best way to get physically stronger, but it's a great way to get mentally stronger as well and really adjust your mindset when going into a training session. Because even if you don't get the 8 or 10 or however many reps you're going for, I don't think it hurts to go up and still try to replicate that set, even if it's a broken set, even if you have to take a break in between to get the full extent of it, you at least went up. You pushed forward, and I think that means a lot more and has way better implications on the amount of effort that went into that set. But even with an added 20 pounds, my depth is exactly where I want it to be. That's right in that sweet spot, right below parallel, maybe even a little deeper than that, but I'm holding that eccentric for as long as I can. I'm at a point now where it's just eccentric to failure, even if it's not 7 seconds. I'd rather get as long as I can hold it with more weight than go back down. Next training session, I'll adjust accordingly, but this is just the theme of this year's prep, pushing forward, having a different mindset, and looking forward to the sessions that have always been historically hard for me. Now, that was it for set 3. It felt a lot better than I anticipated, and that's always a really good feeling. So, like I said before, the rule of swole, I gotta go up. And I end up adding a quarter and a 5 on each side to put me up another 20 pounds. Because, the way I look at it is, worst case scenario, I don't get all the reps that I want. But in these sessions where you come in and you feel absolutely amazing, everything is clicking, everything feels great, knees feel amazing, you have to maximize it. Because with the amount of volume that I'm doing every week, it's kind of difficult to have these types of workouts multiple times a week, which is something that I had to learn over a really long period of time. Most of your sessions, you're not going to feel like Superman. So when you do, you absolutely have to take advantage of it. But 285 on the bar for my last set, and let's see how it goes. Solid set overall. I went to absolute failure, meaning that the set was definitely maximized, which is exactly all I wanted to do. And now we move on to the leg press. These are for a 4 set of 10. I actually have Romanian deadlifts with a dumbbell after squats, but I had a brain fart and completely forgot. Because for the majority of my fitness journey, I've always done compound movements like leg press after squats. Not that RDLs aren't a compound movement, but I've never gotten in the habit of doing them post squat. It's always been leg press. It's always felt weird not doing leg presses right after squats. But definitely a screw up on my part. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. Now, my coach doesn't specify that these are to be done with a slow eccentric, but I do them anyways because in an effort to help my joints get stronger, I don't see why not. At the end of the day, these are an accessory movement, right? They're meant to help strengthen the major compound movements. They're there to kind of prop up everything else. So, if this movement is in my program for the purpose of helping strengthen my squats in the long term, right, I have to do them in a way that benefits me specifically. Anybody else can do them how they want to do it. But for me, having dealt with patellar tendonitis, one thing that's helped is actually doing everything with a super slow eccentric. And since they're not 100% yet, it is in my best interest to continue to incorporate that. I was in physical therapy for about 6 months last year. And, on top of physical therapy twice a week, training with my coach completely changed, right? I had to put my ego at the door of the gym and do everything with a slow eccentric, which naturally meant bring the weight a lot lower. And I remember my physical therapist, who's a powerlifting judge, the guy's a powerlifter himself, and he judges. He's worked with a ton of athletes. He told me at the beginning, this is going to suck. this is going to be very different and it's going to be super uncomfortable. And he wasn't wrong. I'd be at the gym way longer than I normally would be because I'm doing these super slow eccentrics, which is adding a ton of time to my overall workout. But when I would leave those workouts, I would feel amazing. So to me, there's no reason why I can't keep incorporating it, a couple sets here and there. At the end of the day, they're not 100% yet. It's still a work in progress, and I just have to kind of keep at it because rehabbing any body part, especially a tendon, takes time. I had to learn that the hard way. I wanted to see results as early as a week, but it really took 6 months for me to really notice a difference. Before I knew it, I was able to squat weight that I couldn't squat comfortably before. And it just kind of happened because I was meticulous about it. I was purposeful about it, consistent, and I saw the results. So, I kind of had to carry that in everything else and continue to do that to this day. I still do physical therapy at least once a week. I make it an entire workout, which I'm definitely going to post on this channel at some point. But this year, I've tried to be very mindful to not go backwards, not abandon all that work that I did and regress. Because it's easy to make the progress, see the progress, you're doing great, and then revert to old habits and just stop doing what you did to get you to that progress, to get you to that point where, you feel great. It's easy to not do those things anymore. And then before you know it, you're back to square one. So just trying to avoid that by staying consistent with it and continuing to incorporate that physical therapy. Now, at this point, it's on to what was supposed to be dumbbell Romanian deadlifts, but I had another brain fart and went to barbell. I'm just so used to doing barbell more than dumbbell, and these are definitely one of the best compound movements for hamstrings and your lower back. I absolutely love these. And, I'm starting out with a light 185. At this point, I don't need to go crazy heavy because for the purpose of my program, these are an accessory movement, and I don't need to max out. And I usually start these off with no straps, no belt, no assistance, just so that I can work that grip a little bit. Grip strength is super important, especially on the deadlift. And one of the habit changes that I've made is refraining from using Versa grips on movements that can actually help my grip. Obviously I want to go up and get the full benefit of the movement. So if I get to a point where I physically cannot hold the bar anymore, then I'll incorporate the straps. But the goal is to be able to go without it until I absolutely need it because they're assistants. They're assistants. They're not the foundation, the core of the movement. They're just assistants. Okay, they're meant to enhance the movement. So I don't necessarily think it's wise to rely on them heavily. Same thing with a belt. I know that when it comes to any movement that's going to require a ton of trunk strength, my minimum threshold before I get the belt involved is probably 225, especially on an RDL. Third movement in when I'm already fatigued, I'm going to want to get that belt on right around that 225 mark. Because God forbid I pull something on an accessory movement and now my deadlifts are affected, the most important movement. So just being a little bit smart with it. And, I eventually get those straps on because I felt the bar start to slip on the last few reps of 225. So this is where now the assistance I know is needed because if it was slipping on 225, I increase the weight, it's going to start slipping a little bit earlier. Ultimately, it's most important to get the movement done mechanically and get all those reps done in a quality way. So no need to make it significantly hard on myself. As long as I can incrementally get that grip work done on those early reps, that's what that matters. And eventually the goal is I'm going to be able to do these with no straps and get to that point of comfort. But, I'm not going to push it, especially when these are ultimately an accessory movement. Now, if you couldn't tell, I couldn't wait to be done with that set because I don't know about you guys, but on those last few reps of RDLs, I'm gassed. But 275 is loaded onto the bar for my last and final set, and I'm definitely going to need grips for these. Now I'm on to my second to last movement of the workout, which is walking lunges. And in the program, it's specified as 10 reps per leg, but the length of the turf is actually perfect because if I walk that length of the turf, it actually comes out to a total of 20 reps, which is 10 per leg. So that's kind of nice. It takes out the need to actually have to count, and I just know that I just need to walk and get to the end of the turf. So definitely simple enough. So now I'm on to my last and final movement, which is standing calf raises. And I'm doing this with a barbell because the gym doesn't have like a standing calf raise machine. So, just some food for thought in case you guys are watching this. But there is a seated calf raise, and at the time it was taken, somebody was using it. So I figured I'd improvise, which is definitely one of the best skills that my uncle taught me when I first started training. Never sit there and wait an hour for somebody to be done with a machine. An hour is an exaggeration, but what I'm trying to say is you never know how long somebody's going to take, and you don't want to just be sitting there. At that point, you're getting cold. You're not optimizing your workout. So find a modification because there's always modifications. Now, in that last set, you saw me do those straight off of the ground, which in my opinion isn't the best way to optimize this movement because every time I've done a calf raise, regardless on what machine it was, whether it was seated, whether it was standing, my foot is elevated, especially the top part of my foot, allowing my heel to get a better decline so that when I initiate the concentric portion of the movement, I get a much better range of motion. When I get that squeeze, when I initiate the eccentric, I'm stretching that calf as far as it'll stretch. Now, this is something that I usually don't have to improvise, but I started off with one plate on the ground. It was a little too close. It forced my legs to be a little too close together, not really comfortable for that movement. So I ended up getting 2 plates, and that was a lot better. And in case you haven't noticed, calves definitely aren't my strongest suit, but I gotta say they've come a long way. It definitely helps that I'm a lot leaner than I normally am, allowing the calf meat to kind of pop a little bit. They're definitely there. They're definitely there. Not as small as they used to be. They're not going to scream at you. I see some people with massive calves that don't even work out, and I'm like, how? But I don't really care about calves that much. For me, it's less about size and more about proportion. If you have small calves, but they're defined, I think that's more aesthetic than just having massive calves. But in my case, my calves are definitely equally proportionate to the rest of my legs, which in totality is smaller than my upper body, something that, I've kind of learned to accept over time. I want to correct, and all I can do is just hit every leg day with a ton of intensity, equal intensity. But genetically, I'm just upper body dominant, and that's just what it is. But calves are definitely very similar to biceps in the sense where they don't need a ton of weight. They just need to be squeezed. Just squeeze the shit out of them, and something's gonna happen. They'll either get defined or they'll grow over time. But yeah, that's my discourse on calves. But for this next set, I smacked some tens on, putting me at 205. And that's really it for today's workout. Man, it was a great workout. I felt amazing. Days like that, I want to absolutely maximize every single time. And I got to give this workout an A minus. I think that's a pretty fair rating for today's workout. If you watched till the end, thank you so much for watching. I'm Paul Koffi. Catch you in the next one.